The last photograph I have of my grandmother, the one I keep folded inside my journal, is from a Tuesday morning in late September. She's standing in her kitchen on Linwood Street, and her right hand is resting on that old wooden yardstick she'd kept hanging from a brass hook since 1979. The yardstick was worn down at the 36-inch mark from decades of her thumb rubbing the varnish off while she talked. She'd gesture with it when she was making a point, tap it twice against the linoleum, then point it at you like a conductor singling out the second violins. "You give people the whole yardstick," she'd say, "and they'll still ask you how many inches they're entitled to." I used to think it was just a thing old people say. I know better now. On December 31st at 11:47 p.m., I was curled on a second-hand couch in a one-bedroom rental over on McAllister, eating cold sesame noodles straight out of the carton, scrolling past photographs of my entire family ringing in the new year in that same kitchen. My Aunt Doreen had posted a video 40 minutes earlier, golden lighting, the pop of a Prosecco cork, my cousin Marcus wearing the paper crown from a Christmas cracker, my mother's laugh cutting through the noise in that specific performative key she saves for audiences. The yardstick was still hanging on its brass hook behind them. I could see it between Marcus's shoulder and the refrigerator. Nobody had taken it down. Nobody had moved a single thing that belonged to her. And I was the only one who hadn't been invited. I found out about the party the way you find out about most things in a family that's been quietly redrawing its borders around you for years, through a stray text. My younger sister, Jenna, had sent me a message at 4:13 p.m. that afternoon. "Hey, are you coming tonight? Mom said you weren't answering." Only I had answered. I'd called my mother at 9 a.m. that morning to ask if she wanted me to bring anything to the house this week. She'd said, and I quote, "Oh honey, nobody's really doing much this year. Your aunt's not feeling well. We'll all get together in the spring." I told Jenna exactly what Mom said, and Jenna went radio silent. "No, oh God, I'm sorry. No, let me call you back." Just a gray text bubble that hung there like a bruise for 8 hours and counting. So I sat there with the carton of noodles and the television turned off, and I let the quiet of my apartment press against my eardrums while my family's laughter leaked through a 5-inch screen. I didn't cry. Crying would have required a kind of surprise I'd stopped being capable of around the time I turned 24 and understood that exclusion wasn't an accident in my family. It was a choreographed dance, and I'd never been taught the steps. My grandmother's house had been empty since the funeral in October. The estate was still tied up in some vague legal fog that my Aunt Doreen kept explaining away with words like probate and complications, and somehow during that fog, Doreen had ended up with a set of keys and a sense of ownership that settled over her shoulders like a stole. My grandmother, Margaret Irene Calloway, had passed at 83 after a brief, vicious tango with pancreatic cancer. I was the one who drove her to chemo every Wednesday for 4 months. I was the one who learned how to make her tea exactly the way she liked it, 2 minutes steeping, half a teaspoon of honey, mug pre-warmed with hot water because she said cold ceramic was an insult to the tea leaves. I was the one sitting beside her hospital bed at 3 a.m. on the night she died, holding a hand that had gone cool and dry as old paper, while my mother and my aunt were at a hotel bar decompressing from the stress of it all. And now they were drinking Prosecco in her kitchen, and I was the only person not standing under that warm amber light. If you've ever been erased from a family narrative while the ink is still wet, if you've ever watched people who share your blood treat you like a footnote they're hoping the editor cuts for space, then you understand what I did for the next 12 minutes. I stared at the ceiling. I listened to the refrigerator hum. I let the cold noodles sit untouched, and I did absolutely nothing, because the machinery of that kind of hurt moves slow and deep, and it doesn't leave room for dramatic gestures. At 11:59 p.m., my phone lit up again. Not a call, not a text from anyone living. The notification pulsed on my screen with that neutral, sterile tone my phone uses for calendar reminders and software updates. But the sender name stopped my breath in my throat. Margaret Calloway. Under it, a single line of preview text, "Go to the basement. The code is your birthday." I opened the message with fingers that felt like they belonged to someone else. It was a scheduled SMS, the kind you can set up with a third-party app or through some carrier services. She must have queued it weeks or months before she died, timed it to the minute, pinned it to this exact New Year's Eve like a landmine buried under the one night she knew they'd all gather without me. My grandmother, straight-backed, pragmatic, never a wasted word Margaret Calloway, had reached through the static of the grave and sent me an errand at the stroke of midnight. I didn't stop to think. I grabbed my keys and my coat, and I was in my car before the first firework burst over the city. The cold vinyl of the steering wheel biting into my palms as I drove the 12 minutes to Linwood Street with the heat still blowing uselessly against a windshield filmed with ice. The streets were empty. Everyone was inside with their champagne and their noise. I parked 2 blocks away, not in the driveway, because some instinct older than rational thought told me not to announce my arrival. I slipped around the side of the house, past the bare hydrangea bushes my grandmother had loved and my aunt had already stopped watering, and I let myself through the side door that opened directly onto the basement stairs. Nobody locked it. They never did. The basement was cold and smelled exactly like it always had, a mixture of dryer sheets, old cardboard, and the faint iron tang of the sump pump. I pulled the chain on the bare bulb and stood there for a moment, breathing through my mouth, listening to the muffled bass of music and footsteps above me. They were all up there, celebrating, laughing, completely unaware that their ghost had just let me in through the side door. The safe was tucked behind my grandmother's old cedar chest, the one she'd used to store winter blankets and my grandfather's war medals. I'd seen the safe 100 times as a kid and never once asked her what was inside. It was a squat, gunmetal gray box with a digital keypad, modern enough to look out of place against the stone foundation and the cobwebbed floor joists. I knelt down in the dust, the cold concrete biting through my jeans, and I typed in my birthday month, day, year, with the care of someone defusing a bomb. The lock released with a soft hydraulic hiss. I pulled open the heavy door, and what was inside made me realize my family had been lying to me for years. The first thing I saw was a thick manila envelope with my name on it, written in her handwriting. Beneath it, a leather portfolio, a small velvet box, and a stack of legal documents that had no business being in a dead woman's basement instead of a courthouse. My hands started shaking, but I didn't have time to process the full weight of what I was holding because I heard something that made my stomach drop. Footsteps. Above me, then on the basement stairs. Somebody had heard the side door close. The heavy tread stopped 3 steps from the bottom. "Who's down there?" It was my Uncle Ray's voice. And I was kneeling on the floor of a basement I wasn't supposed to be in, holding a secret that was never meant for their eyes, with no exit and no life fast enough to save me. For 3 full seconds, nobody spoke. The basement light bulb swung a slow, pendulous arc on its chain, casting a yellow ellipse that swept back and forth across Uncle Ray's shoes. He was standing 4 steps from the bottom, one thick hand wrapped around the railing, his body leaning forward at a strange, arrested angle. He smelled like gin and the cheap drugstore cologne he'd been wearing since I was in middle school. I could see the moment his brain registered the open safe, the envelope in my lap, the leather portfolio that looked an awful lot like the one my grandmother used to keep in her roll-top desk. "Ray?" That was my mother's voice, traveling down the stairwell from the kitchen above, laced with that tight, performative concern she deploys whenever something threatens to ruin a perfectly good party. "What's going on down there?" "It's the girl," Ray said, though I was 28 years old and hadn't been a girl in a decade. He said it the way you'd announce a stray cat in the pantry. "She's down here." Got into Margaret's things. The footsteps multiplied. Heels on old wood. The basement stairs groaned under the weight of 4, 5, 6 people. I stayed on my knees in the dust, but I didn't put the envelope down. My fingers curled around the manila edge like it was the edge of a cliff, and letting go meant falling. Aunt Doreen made it down first. Her face was flushed from the Prosecco, and she'd thrown a cardigan over her sequined blouse, the one with the peacocks on it. She stopped dead when she saw the safe door hanging open. Her mouth formed a small, perfect O, and her eyes tracked from the velvet box to the stack of documents to my face, and something behind her expression shifted, not surprise, exactly, but recognition. The kind of recognition a fox gets when it hears the hounds. "What did you take?" Doreen's voice had no preamble, no "why are you here?" no "how did you get in?" She went straight to the inventory. "I didn't take anything yet," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "I'm reading." My mother pushed past Doreen's shoulder, and her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set, and I knew that look. It was the look she gave me when I was 12 and asked at Thanksgiving dinner why Grandma wasn't coming that year. It was the look she gave me when I was 18 and told her I was driving Grandma to her cardiologist appointment whether she liked it or not. My mother's love had always been a conditional grant, and I'd been losing eligibility piece by piece for years without understanding the terms of the contract. "You need to hand those over right now," my mother said. "This is a state business. It doesn't concern you." And that was the line that cracked something open inside my chest. Doesn't concern you. After the Wednesdays in the chemo ward, the cups of tea, the 3 a.m. handhold, the funeral where I sat in the back row because Doreen's seating chart had no card with my name on it. After all of it, I was still a trespasser in the narrative they'd written for themselves. I stood up. I'm not a tall woman, but in that low-ceiling basement with the bulb swinging and the furnace kicking on behind me, I felt myself take up space I'd never been allowed to claim before. "Her name is on this envelope," I said. "Margaret Calloway. And right there, in her handwriting, is my name. Not yours, Mom. Not Doreen's. Mine." I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, 4 pages of my grandmother's tight, slanted cursive, and a legal document with a notary seal that made my aunt take an involuntary step backward. The letter began, "My dear girl, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone and your mother and her sister have done exactly what I knew they'd do." I didn't read the rest out loud. I didn't have to. The leather portfolio contained 6 months of bank statements showing systematic withdrawals from my grandmother's accounts, transfers to Doreen's personal checking, checks made out to my mother for amounts just under the gift tax threshold. A credit card opened in my grandmother's name 3 weeks after she'd lost consciousness for the first time. The velvet box held my grandfather's Masonic ring, the one my mother had told everyone was buried with him in 1996. She'd sold a replica on eBay for $1,800 and pocketed the cash, while the real ring sat in a basement safe, waiting for the granddaughter who'd actually shown up. And the legal documents. The legal documents rewired the entire architecture of my family's future in 14 pages of dense, impenetrable legalese that boiled down to one devastating fact. My grandmother had revoked her prior will, the one that split everything evenly between her 2 daughters, and executed a new one in August, 2 months before she died. The new will place the house, the accounts, and the entirety of her remaining assets into a trust. A trust with a single trustee. Me. Doreen lunged for the papers. I sidestepped her, and my cousin Marcus caught her before she stumbled into the cedar chest. "Those are forged," she hissed, her cardigan slipping off one shoulder. She was medicated. She didn't know what she was signing. "You manipulated a dying woman." "She wasn't medicated on August 14th, I said quietly. "I drove her to the notary's office myself. She told me it was for a library donation. I didn't ask questions because she asked me not to." I looked at my mother. "You didn't visit her once in August. You were in Cancun with the man you were seeing before the divorce was even final. Remember? I have the receipts." My mother's face drained of color, and for one bright, brittle moment, I saw her clearly not as my mother, but as a woman who'd spent her entire adult life taking inventory of what she was owed and never once asking what she'd earned. The silence that followed was the deepest silence I'd ever heard in that house. Even the furnace seemed to hold its breath. I tucked the documents back into the portfolio and tucked the portfolio under my arm. I picked up the velvet box and the envelope. "You can finish your Prosecco," I said. "You've got until 1 a.m. to clear out anything that belongs to you personally. After that, I'm changing the locks." Doreen's mouth opened and closed. My mother started to say something that began with "you can't" and ended with "nothing," because I could, and everyone standing in that basement knew it. Marcus pulled his phone out and started filming, which didn't help them and didn't hurt me. Jenna, standing halfway up the stairs in her party dress, had her hand pressed flat against her chest like she was trying to keep her heart from falling out. I met her eyes, and I didn't smile, but I didn't look away either. She'd known about the party. She'd sent the text. She'd chosen her side hours ago. I walked up the basement stairs past my family, who parted for me the way crowds part for someone carrying something dangerous. In the kitchen, the yardstick was still hanging on its brass hook. The golden light was still warm. Somebody's champagne glass sat abandoned on the counter, a single sip left in the bottom, the bubbles long since gone flat. I reached up and took the yardstick down. It was smooth and heavy in my hand, the varnish worn away at the 36-inch mark from 60 years of my grandmother's thumb resting exactly there. "She gave you the whole yardstick," I said, loud enough for everyone in the stairwell to hear. "And you still asked for more inches. You don't get any more inches." I walked out the front door into a new year, carrying everything my grandmother had left me, the truth, the keys, and the whole yardstick.